Now, you just hit on exactly why I always try to recruit as many college athletes as possible, or former college athletes, because they had to prioritize their days so much more than the regular student, especially D1 college athletes. And so if you guys are in firm leader role, if you're in a recruiting role, I'll give you a little secret. Go after college athletes. They know how to prioritize their schedule because they've had to for many years.
Welcome, Model FAs. David DeSalle here, CEO of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. And I am extra fired up for our guest today, Josh Kosnick, who's the CEO and founder of Kairos Coaching and Consulting. And Josh and I crossed paths in a previous life at a previous firm. We've maintained our connection over social media, and it's just awesome how, social media brings people together. I know it can also cause a lot of drama, but there is a lot of good in it if you use it appropriately. And what I like about Josh is he's one of the kindest, yet also no BS guys out there. And in today's episode, we're going to have a leadership focus. Leadership as it relates to leading a healthy lifestyle, which includes your fitness, your relationships, your mind, your body, and your soul, leading a wealth management practice. So if it's you and a partner or you and a staff member, how do you lead that organization appropriately? And then also leading a firm. So for those folks who are leading a larger entity, call it 500 million, a billion or more, this episode is for you. But as a more formal introduction, Josh is a provider, a recruiter, a teacher, and a leader. One of the things that I like about him is he's a type A alpha male that loves to compete, drink bourbon. And if you're watching some of these video clips, you'll see he's smoking a cigar too. He loves those. However, he never shies away from sharing his vulnerable side. And one of the topics that we're going to be weaving in today is a concept that he calls alpha vulnerability. He's passionate about mental health, men's mental health, healing, talking about emotions, supporting each other, and will continue to advocate for all of that. His faith drives him to persevere through pain and suffering because he knows on the other side of those struggles is everything that he's ever dreamed of and everything that he was born to be. So today and in his life, he's here to inspire you to build the bridge that you need in order to cross over your own struggles and achieve the legacy you envision for yourself, fulfill your purpose, and become the leader that you need to be, all while feeling joy and satisfaction throughout your journey of growth. And at the end of the day, he says that life is more than money, business, and materialistic things. It's about the generosity of spirit, authenticity, and becoming the best version of yourself. So in the moment, I was reading your bio off your website, Josh, which is written in first person. So hopefully I didn't mess up trying to, in real time, change it to third person. But welcome to the show. You got a sick podcast set up. I'm remote right now, so you got me beat at my kitchen table studio is what I'll call it. But welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, David. It's great to catch up and reconnect, and hopefully we can have a big impact on the audience today.
For sure. So I actually want to start with the concept that you call alpha vulnerability. And I think the typical sort of assumption is that if you hold yourself out as a tough, alpha style male, that you can't show vulnerability. And some people think that vulnerability is a sign of weakness. And I think that vulnerability, when shared appropriately, can actually build trust and build relationships. But what's your take on that topic? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on with where my head is. And I talk about this a lot because I've been told often throughout my career that I'm intimidating. And part of that is I try to soften that approach. Once people get to know me, they know I'm just a big teddy bear, but so I've gotten that throughout my life. And part of that stemmed from, I grew up with a father who was very intimidating. 6'3", 230, just an intimidating, successful dude. He was also in the industry, managing partner for a long time in Northwestern Mutual. And I grew up with just that, hey, you fall down, you skin your knee, you rub dirt on it, you don't cry, all those different male attributes that we're told. And so I steeled myself up for a long time. And it wasn't until I met my wife and started maturing down this leadership path that I realized that vulnerability was an actual strength. And then I go on to have 3 daughters before I have my son. And vulnerability and patience and all those things really came to the forefront. My daughters have brought that out of me for sure. And so what I've noticed in society is that and especially as this, I hate the terminology to even say it to give it any more light, but it's buzzwords now, the toxic masculinity. Masculinity in and of itself is not toxic. Masculinity is true confidence. Masculinity is owning all the traits that God gave us to be the provider, to be the steward that men are supposed to be the protector for our families. Now, when we steel ourselves up, when we don't show emotion, when we choose to bottle those things up, not talk about it, rub dirt on it, all those different old cliches, that's when toxicity can come out. It's weak men that are toxic. And so I want to help others that I coach, lead, or influence, or even in a conversation today, someone that I may never meet is listening to you and I today. I want you to know that being an alpha and being vulnerability is the ultimate, the pinnacle of strength as a man.
So a couple or one comment and then a follow-up question. You brought up having 3 daughters, and that quickly can change you and make you more vulnerable, or even like softer to a degree, or get in touch with that side, so to speak. I was actually giving my fiance's little sister advice last night, and when I'm with my coaching clients, I'm very like direct and matter of fact and graceful, but like, hey, here's what the deal is, right? You either did it or you didn't do it. And I was giving her advice over like a voice messages back and forth over text. And afterwards I look over at my fiance and she's like teared up. She goes, "I really hope we have a daughter. That was so sweet." Because it was so like stern, but it was a lot like softer. And, I shared some stories from my past in a vulnerable way. And I guess my question, and I agree with everything you said, but when it comes to vulnerability, like, do you have an example or two of like what that looks like in real life or in practice, so that, the folks who are listening can sort of understand a more practical example of what it looks like to be vulnerable while still being someone of strength?
Yeah, no, that's really good question. I also want to say before I answer it that you can be too vulnerable. Maybe I'll try and think of 2 different examples in that regard as well. So if I'm in a coaching session with someone, or if I'm mentoring someone and I have observed them do something wrong, one great way to come about that is to say that, hey, I've actually done what you just did there. And lead with, hey, I'm correcting you out of care, and because I already made that mistake, and here's how that can impact you negatively. It doesn't necessarily mean that you cry on demand. No, you cry when it's appropriate. You don't hold that in, because bottled emotions are only going to come out in a negative way. So I will say that as well. It doesn't mean that you cry on command or that you're a big, blubbering baby. However, you're not scared to cry. You're not scared to cry in front of people. Crying is a normal emotion. Sadness is a normal human emotion and condition. So, like, I've cried from stage in a main stage talk, as much as I'd like to bottle that in, but the emotion got it, and guess what? The audience felt it too.
Yeah, it helps a lot with being able to connect with people, be more relatable to them, as opposed to, my name's Josh, my name's David, and I have all my shit figured out. It's like, no, and I've always said, for the people that I coach that maybe, because there's plenty of people that I coach who are chapters ahead of me, and there's many people that I coach that are chapters, behind me. And what I always, tell folks, especially the folks who are well ahead of me in life, is, and they're like, well, what can you help me with? You're 33 years old. I'm 55. I have a $3 million business. You don't yet. And they don't say it that directly, but how they can bring it up in a roundabout way. And I say, listen, I hear you. Although if you have an open mind and can suppress your ego in the process, you can learn anything from anyone. And my rebuttal to them is, do you have kids? And they say, yes. I say, well, have you learned anything from your kids? And they say, oh yeah, all the time, every day. I'm like, well, there's my point, right? Because you suppress your ego and you have an open mind. And I tell, especially the folks who are earlier in their career, is, to your point of being able to relate to them and share with them, hey, I made that same mistake. I tell them all the time, my job is to get you to do what I've done, just faster and better. There's already been some trips and falls along the way, and here's how you avoid them. Although sometimes not in a malicious way, but it's important for them to also trip and fall themselves and not totally protect and coddle them, because that's where some of the best learning moments ultimately are.
Yeah, I got two quick examples of being too vulnerable. And one I would say is not necessarily being too vulnerable, but rather playing the victim. When you're so vulnerable that it comes off as victimhood and not the victor, that is not attractive, especially if you're a leader. Okay. And then maybe a more practical one, as you asked the question, is, let's say you're a leader, CEO, business owner, whatever it may be, and you have employees, and you're going on and on about how bad business is right now, or how bad finances are right now. That is not going to breed confidence in them as you being the employer, and them thinking about their job security. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't say that, hey, things haven't been going well, because they notice it as well, that things haven't been going well the last few months, but this is how we're going to course correct and fix it. Right? That breeds confidence, that shows a plan, that shows vision, versus just talking about how bad things are right now financially for you on the home front and in business. That's going to breed a ton of insecurity from your employees.
And that's a very important distinction that I want to emphasize. So essentially what you're saying is, being vulnerable by sharing past experiences, how you overcame them specifically, or current experiences and what your plan is to overcome them. It's the idea of being a problem solver, and not someone who just talks about their problems. And so I do want to get into some of the leadership stuff. And before we hit record, we were just, talking about 75 Hard, Andy Frisella's program, and how I'm doing that now. You've done that in the past, maybe even done the full Live Hard program. And for those of you who don't know, Andy Frisella, he has multiple companies. I want to say it's in the billion or so range in terms of valuation. And he has a program called 75 Hard, which is a mental toughness program that has fitness benefits to it as well. And it involves doing 2 45-minute workouts a day, one of which needs to be outside regardless of the weather. He needs to drink a gallon of water every day. You also need to pick a diet and stick to it. So they don't have
cheat meals.
Yeah, no cheat meals, no alcohol. You have to read 10 pages a day of a personal development book, and take a progress picture. You don't have to necessarily post it on social, but you need to take a progress picture. So, you can see your progress over time, and remind yourself to do the little things every day, the little meaningless things that, can create some momentum. So my point of sharing that is, that's one of the areas that I connect with you on a lot, is, the foundational aspects of life that allows us to go through some of the trying times that as humans and as business owners and as professionals, we deal with on a day-to-day basis. But I want to talk regarding leading a healthy lifestyle around fitness, relationships, mind and body and soul. I want to talk about that conceptually, and then I'd like to go into each of those subsets, and I'll tee up these questions to give more practical examples. So conceptually, why is it important to lead a healthy lifestyle? And then we'll give some examples as to what that looks like in fitness, in your relationships, in your mind, your body, and your soul.
Beautiful. And I loved how you set that up, because a lot of people look at 75 hard, A, as a challenge, or B, as something physical. And the way David said it was really important. It's a program, and it's far more mental than it is physical. You're going to get in great shape regardless doing 2 workouts a day, but it is far more mental than it is physical. So love how you teed that up.
Of course. So conceptually, leading a healthy lifestyle, why is that important? Have you always led a healthy lifestyle? Have there been bumps in the road along the way? Talk to me about that journey and why that's important.
So I would love to sit here and say I've always led a healthy lifestyle and I've been perfect in every way, David.
Are you about to be vulnerable, Josh?
Yeah, about to be a little vulnerable, but as always, lead with vulnerability. So I played sports all through growing up, and was blessed to play college football D3 for a couple of years before I dropped out of school, and therefore went my football career as well. But then I was pretty healthy through my 20s, got into financial advising at 24, building a great practice and getting to that 100 AUM level by 35. At 36, I was asked to take over as managing partner. I was chosen. And it was right in that time, I knew a few months ahead of time. My takeover date for my father was November 1st. And in August, I'm at a Ben Newman boot camp in Vegas. I've known Ben since 2005. He's a great friend, and he was holding a boot camp back then. And how he got me there, because he had thrown several before, but he had my childhood hero there, Jerry Rice, speaking. Nice. And had Tyron Woodley, who just won the welterweight championship, and Navy SEAL that was on SEAL Team 6 on the Bin Laden mission. So amazing speakers. And at that point in my life, I'm at the peak of my professional career, and I was at the trough of my physical being, right? So everything else is going, marriage, kids, business, spiritual, like everything's going well, except I had let myself go physically. And I'm sitting at the pool with all these guys and gals, all very physically fit, all successful people that are in attendance. And I said something completely inauthentic. And it was one of those things, I don't know if you've done this before, David, but the moment the words came out of my mouth, I felt gross.
Certainly.
Like it was the most inauthentic thing I've ever said.
You're like, wow, that was a load of crap that just came out of my mouth.
It was. And here's what the load was. I said, this is what the remnants of what used to be a high-level athlete. And although that's true, I wasn't making a factually incorrect statement.
But you just feel like a wuss when you verbalize your thoughts like that.
Yes. And I'm around all these like elite level people. Like Jerry Rice is 50 years old at the time and still looked like he could go out on the field. And that very next day, Ben had us doing this exercise. And I was writing down, and I'm sure most people are writing down, visioning things for their business and whatnot. Well, I was already at the peak of mine, although I didn't ever want to think I had arrived. My weakness was my physicality at that point. And I wrote down this: I have 3 little girls to walk down the aisle someday, and I need to do everything in my power to be there by their side. Now, I know God's in control of, I can't control accidents, all the different stuff, but I need to control what I can control. And that very next week went in to get my blood work done, signed up with a personal trainer, did all the different things, and have been on a journey the last 7 years to be in the best shape I've been since I played college football. And I would argue that I'm in better shape now than I was then. The only difference is that my knee and shoulder don't feel, arthritis in my knee and shoulders don't allow me to necessarily feel as healthy as I felt when I was 22, 23.
Yeah, we have, and I've had somewhat of a call it lumpy journey from college to now as it relates to, fitness and the role it's played in my life. But over the last few years, I've been on my game, and it feels really good. And what I noticed as I reflect back throughout the highs and lows of that part of my life, whether business was like, let's say business was going well, my relationships were going well, but I was fat and overweight and feeling like crap. You feel off. And if you're ripped and relationships are going well, but you're not making any money, you feel off. And if you're making money and you're looking good, but you're not fostering the relationships around you, you feel off. So, and a lot of these folks that we've mentioned, Ben Newman, Andy, they all have various lists, like Ben's Prize Fighter Day, Andy's Power List. And we developed our own list called the C3 list, which stands for commitment, right? You got to commit to things, consistency, be consistent with the follow through on those. And ultimately, it builds your confidence. And I remember when I met my fiance a few years back, we were chit chatting outside of a bar, and she looks at me and she's like, why are you so confident? And I took me a second and I thought about it. And my cocky, non-vulnerable response at that time was, I keep little promises to myself every single day. And so the C3 list is made up of 5 things that you do every day that fit 3 categories. It's 2 things that move you forward personally, 2 things that move your business forward, and 1 thing that moves others forward. So personal things could be as simple as getting out of bed without hitting the snooze button. It could be working out. It could be eating clean. It could be reading a book, right? Whatever it is, but it moves you forward on the personal side of your life. As it relates to business, it could be asking for, introductions a certain amount of times, making a certain amount of phone calls, a certain amount of touch points, certain amount of, pieces of content that you push out. And then to move others forward around you, it could be a random act of kindness or 2 every day, like holding the door open for that awkward amount of time where they start jogging behind you, or putting an extra shopping cart away, when you're at the grocery store. It could be calling a person or 2 every day just to check in with them with no agenda. I remember when I was an advisor in my early career, every time I reached out to someone, it was because I wanted their time, their money, or their network. And I didn't do a good job fostering those relationships. And what I found is when you implement these things on a daily basis, and one key thing to note, if you didn't catch it as I was going through that, is everything I mentioned is 100% in your control. It's action driven, not results driven. And it's either you did it or you did not do it. And what I found is when you implement those things in those 3 categories, you increase your confidence, but you also have a well-rounded life. As opposed to feeling proficient in certain areas and feeling deficient in certain areas. So I guess my question is, so did you say 3 girls and a boy, or 2 girls and a boy?
3 girls and a boy. So at the time when I was at that boot camp, my son's 6, so he wasn't born yet. So I had 3 girls at that time. And go ahead with your question. I had one other thought there that I want to make sure we get back to.
Okay, cool. So my question is, and then we'll get back to that thought. You have a business, you have a spouse, you have 3 kids, 3 girls and a boy. And I hear from folks all the time, like, oh, you don't have kids, you don't understand. Like, I don't have time to work out, or I don't have time to do this. So my question is, how are you fitting all this stuff in to maintain a well-rounded life, still be present for your family, still be effective in your business, and still follow through with your fitness goals?
I switched the mentality entirely. So I'll actually answer my other thought there with this question here. So I'm 10 years older than you. I just turned 43. Me being over 40 and as fit as I am is a bigger flex than whatever nice watch I put on that day. Like, real talk.
It is.
Like I didn't wear one of my nice watches today for this interview. I apologize. But I can sit here and flex on you, my, in general, like, to answer your question really succinctly, is I flipped the mindset. I have to be physically fit. I have to be mentally fit to show up to be my best for my wife, for my kids, for everyone I coach, for everyone I influence, for every business owner that I go in to help. And even when I was running the firm, I needed to be at my peak game and lead by example in all facets. And it's interesting, when you have a leader that's fit, most people follow suit. When you have a leader that's fat and overweight, other people think that's okay too. And so you got to be cognizant of how you're leading your people. If you're a leader of a firm, are you leading them down a path of health, or are you leading them down a path of destruction? And it's not just business, because they're watching everything you do. You're the example. So be a good one.
Yeah. How should I say this? Whether it's people looking up to you or us looking up to others, I found myself over time switching from wanting to be like people who have found success monetarily, regardless of the other ways in which they live other aspects of their life, to now more so looking up to people who don't necessarily have it all figured out, but have it all together. Because no one ever has it all figured out, and people don't really even have everything all together, but you can tell when they're working hard in all areas of their life. And there's just like a different level of respect and admiration that I've noticed myself having for those people that are not just monetarily successful, but are also in good shape. And, even, myself, as I, kind of analyze my past, anytime I felt my best and I've made a lot of money, I've been in the best shape. Every time I do 75 hard every year, and every time I do it, business grows way more than the times in which I don't do it. So maybe I need to do 365 hard every day, or, every year, to keep that going. But yeah, I just find myself respecting and admiring the people around me more so when they have a great business, they have a great family life, and quite frankly, they have a great body. Because you can't buy being in good shape. You can buy accountability, but it requires work.
No, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to try and insert there with it when you weren't done. But 75 hard, the reason you do so well in business when you're on it is because you prioritize your schedule so dang much. There is no time to mess around. Right? So you got to get 2 workouts in per day. Depending on where you live, right? It's either uber hot, especially during the summer, or when you do the program as well. I always do it during the winter because I live in Wisconsin. So I want to put myself through the worst of the things, right? So I got to go trudge through snow most of the time in the winter. So I'm planning, my outdoor outfits. I'm planning a change of clothes because I sweat underneath those outdoor outfits. And then your indoor outfit, so you're plotting ahead, and you do that not just for your workouts, you do that for your entire day. So I got to fit this workout in here. Then I got these meetings. Then I got to fit this workout in here. Then I got these meetings. And then I got this family thing, right? So you're just far more cognizant about how you structure your day and planning ahead. And that's why you'll get better at business. And it's just to answer your question and sum this up. When you're being proactive with your calendar and proactive with your health and how to fit it all in, it's like you will fit in whatever you prioritize fitting in. And now I will say that I have an amazing spouse that supports me in this, and she is very health conscious herself. She's getting her master's in nutrition as we speak. And so having a spouse that's bought in around the same wavelength as far as that is concerned is hugely helpful. However, if they're not bought in, have them experience the change in you by you leading first. You go first. show all the ways that you feel better and all the amazing things that you get done while getting fit. And I guarantee they'll follow.
It's interesting too, when you shared about how you prioritize when you're doing 75 hard and you fit everything in and you keep a strict calendar. And I think back to even like high school. So in the fall, I ran cross country. In the spring, I played baseball, and then I did winter track 1 year. And I didn't do it for the other 3 years. And I always got like good-ish grades through high school, like A's and B's. The B's are the ish. But my B's always came. My B's always came during the winter when I didn't have a sport. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. The busier you are, the more effective you tend to become. And when you have more time on your hands, laziness and just a subpar sort of approach to life tends to creep in. Whereas when you're super busy, you tend to get way more stuff done during those times. It's almost like I feel most effective when my day is planned out to a T, and when I have like a meeting or two during the day, and nothing else really planned out, I get like nothing done on those particular days. And I look back and I'm like, damn, why did I do that? Like, you need to block and tackle and plan everything out to a T, because you're able to sit down, focus, bang it out. Whereas if you have a lot of time on your hands, you tend to just waste it.
Now, you just hit on exactly why I always try to recruit as many college athletes as possible, or former college athletes, because they had to prioritize their days so much more than the regular student, especially D1 college athletes. And
sure.
So if you guys are in firm leader role, if you're in a recruiting role, I'll give you a little secret. Go after college athletes. They know how to prioritize their schedule. They know how to get shit done because they've had to for many years.
100% agree. So we've kind of stayed up here, and in the conceptual and sort of mindset approach to living a healthy lifestyle, we've added some practical examples, but let's just do a quick kind of, spitfire examples of like, what does a healthy lifestyle look like as it relates to fitness, relationships, mind, body, and soul? Like, what are things that you do on a daily basis or weekly basis to be able to check all those boxes, starting with fitness?
Starting with fitness, I'm a late afternoon workout guy, but I get in at least one workout per day when I'm on Live Hard program. For those that don't know, the Live Hard, 75 Hard's the beginning, and then there's 3 30-day periods that you split out throughout the rest of the year that are similar, but they add a few different twists to it. But I'm doing at least one workout per day on the fitness side.
Cool. Relationships.
Oh man. Prioritizing your spouse first. So we're not a weekly date night. I mean, we got 4 kids. My wife's getting her master's. I'm building 3 different businesses. So we do not have time right now for a weekly date night. But communication is really key in this season of life for us, where like I'm doing some traveling for helping business owners right now. Like, the kids got this, she's got this, like we got to be on our game communication wise. But we are prioritizing. We had our 15th wedding anniversary this summer. We had a few days away just alone for that. Took her back to the place I proposed to her at. So just, I think, planning ahead a little bit for your spouse, like prioritizing them. Even if you can't do weekly date nights, show that you care by planning certain things for special occasions.
Mind.
Every morning routine. So morning routine gets pretty redundant in the success circles, but I will say this. Again, I have 4 kids. I make sure I'm up early enough. My alarm goes off at 5:04 a.m. The number 9 has a lot of special meaning in my life. So every alarm adds up to 9 because people ask me why that weird number. But so I have about an hour and a half before any of the kids get up. And that's when I'm reading. I'm doing my breathing exercises. I'm doing my prayer and meditation, my daily gratitudes. All that different stuff is done in the morning in the quietness because that's the only quiet period I have during the day.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, what's the significance of the number 9?
Number 9 shows up everywhere in my life. It was my football number, but literally everything. So it just shows up everywhere.
Gotcha.
From birth dates to special occasions, all the different things.
Cool. Body, similar to the fitness, I would imagine. Let's go to soul.
Soul, friendships. I think, oh man, for soul things, my relationship with God, friendships, doing things that you enjoy. I try to do things that, so for instance, you guys bearing with me this morning, David being gracious to allow me to do it. One of the things that's good for my soul in the morning is a Cuban cigar and coffee. It's literally one of my favorite things on the planet.
Well, it also, in fairness, between the cigar and the coffee, it allows your body to, let's just say, properly process first thing in the morning.
Yeah, something like that. I'm sure there's major health benefits we could ask the experts on. But that's like my one vice. It's like my one vice, and especially, I don't drink as much anymore. Especially after doing 75 hard, live hard, you just learn to do without it and be in social situations without it. And so cigars are my one vice right now. That's good. That I really enjoy that. If someone tried if that was taken away from me, I'd have to find a substitute of something else. But find those things that you really enjoy and see how you can weave that in. Like I started a mastermind called Book and Bourbon Club around things that I really enjoy. I love personal development. I love pouring into people. And I love bourbon. So we matched those things together. And so I just put it out to the universe and was like, hey, who likes these 3 things as well? And enough people signed up. We made it a thing.
Love it. So let's, on the same topic of leading and leadership, we've talked a lot about, how you lead a good life in general. Let's talk about how you lead a firm. So I'm sure there's similar principles and maybe we can lump it all together, but there's advisors out there listening to this that are early on in their career. Maybe they don't have a team yet. And I think a lot of the leadership stuff has to do with what we've discussed so far. Because in order to be able to lead others in the future, you need to be able to lead yourself as well. But let's say, there's an advisor listening that has, a small team around them, or, let's say they're leading a $1 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion, firm, and they have 50, 70, 100 different folks within the organization. How do you lead those people around you so that you're all pulling from the same side of the rope?
Oh, really good question, David. So for background, I mentioned it earlier, but I led a team in a small firm as an individual producer. I'd never ensembled with other producers. I ran it as my own and had a few person team before I sold that and took over the firm, where I had over 100 advisors and about 250 total between staff and advisors. I think first comes with the recognition that just because you're a great advisor does not mean you're a good leader. And in fact, I would go so far to say you probably suck as a leader. And the reason I can say that is because I did too. And so you have to become a student of the game. Get some great mentors, get some great coaches, get a great mastermind or study group around you that calls you on your shit. Have good enough relationships with your key team members, not staff, team members, that will call you on your shit, and you have an open enough relationship to say, hey, yeah, I messed up there. And so become a student of that game and become a better leader. Go to seminars, look outside your company or outside the 4 walls of whatever company you may be in. And if you're an RIA, you're in a really small group. So you really got to figure out who's going to be a mentor or someone that can call you out, someone that can speak truth into your life, or many people. The more that you can have, the better. So it takes a lot to run a big firm. And if you want to decrease turnover, if you want to increase retention, one and the same, you really got to be that leader and lead in all facets of your life that people want to follow.
So you said something important in there, which is you're So I'll speak to Northwestern in this regard, and I think we can both agree that they've done a great job building a culture, right? Great culture. And I say it like that because they've done such a good job that it's almost to a fault where they have these, and it's not just Northwestern, it's plenty of other companies too, where maybe some would say intentionally, others would say unintentionally, they kind of build walls around the organization. But it's very important to poke your head outside of those walls, because there's so much good information out there. So one of the things, and we'll get to this, later on, but I asked all of our guests about a book that's had an impact on them, because I find a lot of advisors, what they learn on a daily basis has to do with financial planning and with the markets and the economy. But the amount of leadership books, the amount of marketing books, general personal development books, like all those nuggets can be brought within those walls and implemented. And I'm curious to know, with all that in mind, how do you, because I feel like when folks go from being in business for themselves to then building a team around them, one of the things they struggle with the most is being a leader while also balancing being friendly or friends with the people around them, but also needing to still emphasize the fact that, like, you are in charge, and there needs to be a certain level of like respect there. But you don't want to come off as being a jerk about that. And then some people either over rotate, their ego gets in the way, and they're like, it's my way or the highway type of vibe, or they rotate in the other direction and they're out being friendly with everyone. And when it comes time to get stuff done, they can't really corral those people around them. So how do you suggest folks deal with that kind of push and pull dynamic of being friendly with the folks that they're leading, friends with the folks that they're leading, but still effectively being able to lead those folks and drive them to take the appropriate action? I know I struggled with that. So
yeah, oh, definitely. And it is a struggle. In fact, I'll go back to the culture comment. It's not just Northwestern. They have built an incredible culture. And I will say that, right, it is a little bit of a cult-ish in the fact that as soon as I left there, like many of those, like I was outside of it, right? And to learn from all these different other places, and now I get the opportunity to coach people in RIAs and different competitive companies, and they all got great stuff. But when I was being recruited by all these other companies after I left Northwestern, some of these people really high up at these other companies, from Mass, Guardian, even Fidelity, and other investment firms that I was getting recruited by, they were using some of the same buzzwords that were used by Northwestern corporate. And I was like sitting there to myself thinking, do you guys all get into a room at the end of the year and like decide what buzzwords you're going to use to brainwash your field force? Like that was the sick feeling I got as I was being recruited by these other firms. And it's not, I mean, nothing against anyone. I'm just saying it was just interesting to hear that. So it's definitely not Northwestern. They definitely put up walls because they're all terrified of their advisors getting recruited away. But going to your question specifically, the biggest thing that I found is you got to find a balance of knowing when you're the leader, when to pull yourself out of situations. Like going to have a couple drinks with your advisors is definitely not a bad thing, or breaking bread with your advisors or your team members, definitely not a bad thing. In fact, it's a very good thing. There's a lot of great conversations that can come out of that. When the night progresses and they're going to stay out, or they want to go to a strip club or casino or whatever, you cannot go do that. You're going to have to pull yourself. You're not one of the guys anymore. Okay. And in fact, I watched this happen literally because I took over the firm I grew up in. The moment my contract switched from managing director to managing partner, I was no longer one of the guys. Everyone's relationship got recontracted. Every single person treated me differently overnight because I was now the guy. And I was like, it was a hard thing to go through because I was like, wait, I didn't change. Some of these people are my friends. Some of these people were employees, whatever it may be. But their view of me changed overnight. And that was a hard thing to reconcile. So it's just understanding that your position does carry weight and that you have to walk a fine line of being the leader, because you're no longer, you were a leader. Now you're the leader. It's a very different thing. And you got to make sure that you are friendly, but not too friendly to the point where they think that they can take advantage of you.
Yeah. And
or that it diminishes their view of you, I should say.
Yeah. And I understand that quite a bit, because I remember when I had a team of advisors, my first couple of years, I'd go out and be one of them, so to speak. And I found that it wasn't said, but it was felt that there wasn't a certain level of respect for me any longer, because I was in the trenches, with them, so to speak, outside the office walls. And when I shifted that, I saw the level of respect increase, and it was easier to lead them once I put a wall up between us and them, me and them, as it relates to as the night progresses, example that you gave. So that is helpful as it relates to how to balance some of those social settings. What about when you're in the office? I know we talked briefly, and we've had a couple episodes on this. We use it, we deploy it with our clients, but we talked about the EOS system from the book Traction. Tell me more about how you can leverage that to help lead the firm.
All right. So I am an EOS implementer. That wasn't in my bio. One of the things that I found as I was coaching entrepreneurs, advisors, and so on, is that there's really two major problems that all of us face. And then there's 136 issues underneath those problems, but the two major ones are human development, leadership development, put that under the same box. And that I've been very good at for a long time because I studied it and trained in it and embodied it for a long, long time. The other one is systems and processes to help scale and grow. And that's where EOS came in. So I looked around the country. I knew of EOS because I tried implementing it on my own within my firm at Northwestern years ago. And but I then looked around to see what else was out there, and it just kept popping up that EOS was the right system. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go get trained in that. So I did. And how you can deploy it in your system, well, first, they're going to be vulnerable and tell you how I screwed it up. I'm so ADD that I didn't read the epilogue part of the book, the very end of it, that says you can hire an implementer to have you implement these tools into your system. Didn't read that part. I tried implementing it on my own, and I would have gladly wrote a check to an implementer to help us implement within our company, because at the time, I looked around my leadership table and I had a whole bunch of visionaries. I had a whole bunch of mini me's. And I didn't have an integrator that could help us implement all our crazy ideas. So I definitely would have hired an outside person. I believe there are strong enough leadership teams that could do it on their own, but sometimes, or a lot of times, you can get too close to the forest to see the trees. And that's where I was. And it actually was my demise at Northwestern as well. I had a rotten leader on my team. And because I had a track record of developing other immature leaders out of their immaturity, I think my ego got in the way and was not seeing that this person, it wasn't immaturity, it was actual character flaws. And they were becoming a cancer within my culture because we were killing it performance-wise. However, we had this hole that wasn't getting plugged because this specific leader was a big cancer in our culture. And had I had an EOS implementer, had I had a third-party business consultant or coach in the leadership room with me, they would have called it out and said, Josh, you got to do something.
Understood. And for those of you who aren't familiar with EOS, grab the book traction, read about it. Google Model FA EOS podcast, and there's a couple in there. One with John Kennedy and Matt Marcoux, and how they've implemented it within their ensemble size practice. And then another episode with Matt Kosnick, who implemented it with $1 billion firm, and they've operated on that, not just with their $1 billion RIA, but I think they have, and I may misquote this, like 160 or some odd CPAs in the firm as well. They were an accounting practice that launched in RIA. So the important thing with EOS to note is that you could implement it personally in your solo business, and you can implement it with, a few hundred person organization as well. But definitely grab that book. And speaking of,
David,
go ahead.
Just real quick, the average growth for a business, and this is outside of the financial industry as well as inside of it, the average growth is 34.4% year over year growth after implementing EOS.
And the thing with that stat that it doesn't take into consideration, that's an important note, is presumably that is a stat on growth in revenue, presumably, which is standard measurement of growth. But a lot of the things that you're doing with EOS are things such as, improving and scaling your marketing plan, or creating standard operating procedures, elevating the client experience, buttoning up the service model, because everyone, regardless of their role, is going to identify their quote unquote rocks that they're going to focus on over a 90-day period. And that I'm not going to make up math right now, but that 34% growth in revenue average, the growth in value to the firm is way higher than that, because, let's say, in our industry, roughly speaking, you have $1 million profit business, and your business is being bought for between call it a 5 to 8 times multiple. So your business is worth between $5 and $8 million. And if you have company A, company B, and they both have $1 million in profit, well, how do you know if it's worth 5 million or 8 million? Well, 70% of that difference in value is based on the intangible assets that I just mentioned. So if you have a well-oiled machine, you have a transferable marketing plan, you have standard operating procedures. So if you got hit by a bus, someone could come in and run it basically right away. You're going to command a higher multiple than a business who just has $1 million in profit, that you open up the hood and it's an absolute mess. So I want to emphasize the fact that it's not just going to help increase your revenue, but ultimately upon exit, it's going to exponentially increase your value. Because if you have a 34%, I guess I will do some math right now, I'll whip out my phone, but on that $1 million, if you have a 34% increase, that's $340,000. And if you multiply that by let's say the business isn't in good shape and it's a 5 times multiple, that's an increase in value in 1.7 million, but that 340,000 times an 8 times multiple, there's an extra $1 million in value that you created by focusing on your intangible assets as well. So
I don't think anyone's going to turn away another $1 million.
I don't think so either.
But hey, you summed that up so well. The only thing you didn't cover is issues. You summed that up so well. And the other piece of this is that someone looking to take over, you now have a team that is used to solving issues at their root, not discussing issues or solving them at their symptoms. You have a team that would be transferable to anyone that's looking to purchase your business, that's solving issues at the root cause so that they're gone forever. I mean, how many businesses could we go into right now, and whether they're in the financial advisory industry or not, and buy a team that is used to solving issues at their root cause? It's got to be less than 1%.
Yeah, they're waiting to be told what to do. And in this process, you're giving all of them ownership to not just be a problem finder, but a problem solver. And that is incredibly attractive to a buyer of your business. Well, Josh, I think we could chat all day, and we're going to continue to chat. We'll probably do a part 2 at some point. I know that we have some collaboration opportunities together in the coming months and moving forward. So this won't be the last time that you're speaking with our audience or vice versa. But I do want to do a hard pivot. I guess not a hard pivot because we were just talking about a book, Traction. But as a reminder of what I mentioned earlier on the show for everyone who's listening, if it's your first episode, one of the things that we ask all of our guests is a book that's had an impact on them. There's so many books out there. You may not know where to start. You may be stuck in learning about your industry, in this case, financial services, and you may want to branch out a little bit. So why not ask the high performers that we're having on the show about a book that's had an impact on them? And the book that Josh chose is a book that's been brought up multiple times on the podcast. So if you haven't yet checked it out, let this be your reminder and the sign to, actually get off your butt and buy it and read it, or at least listen to it on audiobook. But the book you chose is Think and Grow Rich. And we were chatting before I hit the record button about how I was glad you picked that, because it's a book I read or listen to every single January as sort of hitting the refresh button at that time of year. But why'd you pick that book? What's the impact that it's had on you and your life?
First book my dad ever gave me after I dropped out of school was Think and Grow Rich, and I couldn't put it down. So it has sentimental value, but I'll tell you this as well. I personally feel that every personal development book or self-development book that's come out since 1937 has stolen from Think and Grow Rich at least something. Napoleon Hill put this together over 20 years of research. I mean, no one puts together books of research over 20 years anymore. The last one that I can remember beyond this was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Covey also spent 20 years putting that together. But he went through, talked about masterminds well before. I think he was the first one that talked about masterminds and having great people in your circle speaking truth into your life. He also talked about manifestation before manifestation was scientifically proven, like it is today, and being able to study our brains. Like, he just knew it was a thing because of all the people that he had studied in Carnegie's Rolodex. Having brought these things to life, he was able to write so intelligently about manifestation, and now we know it to be something that we can do in our lives. He was writing about it in theory based on all the interviews that he had done. And one of the more powerful things that people lean against,
I already know what you're going to say.
Uncomfortable is the sexual transmutation in this book. If you think about the power of that, especially us men, how we're driven sometimes by our little head over our big head. If you can remove your ego, your uncomfortableness with that chapter, and understand what it's actually saying, and taking that one, every man listening to this, and possibly women as well, know exactly what I'm talking about. When you have a one-track mind and all you can think about is sex, like, if you could transmute that feeling, that singular focus into your goal, your vision, whatever it may be, and use that same energy, the world is your oyster. But so many people go away from that just because it's talking about sex, or like have a weird feeling about it. I'm like, no, like, he's talking about the absolute power. And if you've ever been, which most of us have, in that singular mindset where that's all you can think about, then you know the power behind it.
It's that chapter specifically, it took me probably 2 or 3 times of reading it every year to like fully grasp what it was saying. Cause when I would read it, it would cause me to like, just think, like, when you're reading, but you're thinking, so therefore you don't really remember what you're reading. Like, I'd always think like, what, I don't understand this, or this is weird, or like I'd be just drifting away during that chapter. And it took like 2 or 3 times to like actually grasp it. And I know I said we were wrapping up, but you mentioned something, and I want to go back to it. Talk to me about dropping out of school. What was that? What did you do the next day or between then and when you ultimately started as an advisor? Tell me about it.
Yeah. So like I mentioned briefly before, my dad was in the industry. So and I'm the oldest of four. So him and I didn't see eye to eye through that period of life, teenager to young 20s, trying to blaze my own trail. And so I went to college, honestly, to continue my football career. It wasn't really to go to college. College and school, because I'm ADD and I was undiagnosed at that time, ADD wasn't as big of a thing for us in our 40s as it is today. It's more recognized. And so that traditional school setting wasn't great for me. I was an average student, C student. And it wasn't for lack of smarts. It was just, I couldn't focus. And so I had a part-time job selling electronics at Circuit City. Then I switched over to Best Buy, and when I dropped out of school, they gave me a sales manager job because I was very good at what I was doing there. So this is actually kind of a funny story, and it actually leads into the financial advisory world. If we have a couple more minutes, we good to tell it?
Yeah.
All right. So my dad is not the one that recruited me into this business.
Stay at Best Buy.
Contrary to popular belief. He did not. He never discouraged any of us. In fact, both of my brothers are now in the business, my younger brothers. And one is a high-level leader already, and one just started in the business after many years of trying to avoid it. However, I'm sitting at Best Buy, and a call comes in. And the ops manager transferred it over to me. And I get on the phone, and this is actually my first mentor. He calls and goes, "Hey, Josh, how you doing?" I said, "Good." He goes, I'll remove his name from this in case he doesn't want to be embarrassed. And he goes, "This is so-and-so. I got your name from Kevin. He says you're an up-and-coming rising leader there at Best Buy. And, I run my own practice financial practice in Northwestern Mutual. I'd love to sit down with you and show you the type of work we do." And I'm going through my head, and I'm sitting there going, did my dad put him up to this? And so I say to him, "Hey, I don't want this to come off cocky, but do you know who I am?" And he goes, No, Kevin just said some great things about you. Just want to show you the type of work to do, get together, blah, blah, blah. Okay, do you know who my dad is? And he goes, "Oh, shit." After I said my dad, because he worked for my dad at that time. And but it was interesting. That call came in the same week. I had asked for a raise, and they told me no. I was running a top 3 store in the country, and I knew other sales managers getting paid more than I was just because they're older than me. And my competitive brain or ego, whatever, just that didn't sit right. So that call comes in 2 days after I get told no for a raise. I hang up the phone after denying him for a meeting. And I was like, that's what I should be doing. So I turned in my 2 months. I gave him 2 months because it was during the holiday season. This is how much corporate cares about you. I turned in 2 months, said, "I don't want to leave you hanging during holiday season without a sales manager." The next day I show up, they go, "You can hand in your keys now."
Wow.
And so, they gave me extra time to study for my life and health exam and get started, fast forward on my investment stuff, get my list of people to call. And I started in January of 2005.
Love it. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And I wonder if your dad gave this guy who called you some crap, why are you calling someone at Best Buy? You got to go up market.
No, he was just trying to scrap and crawl and make it. You're right. But what's interesting about that, it taught me a good lesson. I hope others listening to this today call. He got told no by my ops manager because the ops manager had a relationship with someone at New York Life for a long time. He got told no, and he prospected right over the phone for up-and-comers and got transferred over to me in that call. So he got told no in 2 calls, but talk about perseverance and fortitude to continue going. And then that person, within a few months of the business, I asked for my dad for him to be my mentor, even though he was brand new, because I respected his hustle.
Love it. So before we wrap up, Josh, and again, this has been awesome. I like the candidness, the realness, the kindness, and the alphaness of this podcast. And we were talking before, You have a mastermind specifically for financial advisors. I think you recently launched or will be launching soon. So if folks are listening to you and they want more of you, be it just a connection on social media or look to see what the setup is to work with you more formally, where can they find you? Where should they connect with you? Where do you want them to go?
Yeah, all social media stuff is at Josh Kosnick. That's Kosnick. But the mastermind that you brought up is brilliant because you alluded to it earlier. These companies do put up walls. So my almost 20 years in the business, as well as over 15 years being a part of study groups and masterminds, both small and very, very large, I'm taking the best of both worlds. And I want to break down all the walls that these companies have created and create a collaborative community where RIAs, captives, and everything in between can communicate with each other. Because at the end of the day, we're about serving our clients better. Okay, so there's 2 calls a month within that mastermind. One is more language and learning based, and the other is life and leadership, like we talked about today, making sure that we're not just successful in the business, but also happy in our marriages, healthy, good relationship with our kids, all that different stuff, because it's no use to us to be uber successful and wealthy, but morally bankrupt. So I want to make sure that both are lining up there and create this collaborative community. So if anyone's interested, it's Kairos, Kairos, mastermind.com. We launched just after Labor Day. I know this is probably going to come out way after Labor Day, but please look us up. DM me for any questions that you may have. It is a vibrant, the people that are already signed up for it are amazing advisors throughout the country that lean into abundance. So if you're an egotistical chest beater, this isn't a community for you. We're creating collaboration and would love to have you.
Love it. Well, Josh, like I said earlier, this won't be the last time that we talk. We have some collaboration opportunities. We've developed a friendship. So I appreciate you spending your precious cigar and coffee time with me this morning, and looking forward to continuing to collaborate with you, and appreciate your time today.
Yeah, I appreciate it, David. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Take care.